Welcome to Small Biz Life, episode 118, The Basics of Online Summits.
Does this sound familiar?
Oh my God, I have so much to do today.
Don't forget to breathe.
But I have almost 400 emails in my inbox and 30 phone calls to make.
Have you looked into getting a virtual assistant yet?
Oh, and I need to schedule all my social media posts.
Did you drink anything today?
I had coffee.
Did you eat today?
Did I mention coffee's a bean?
This is Small Biz Life.
Hey guys, welcome to Small Biz Life. If you're a returning listener, thanks so much for being with us again this week. And if you're new to the show, thanks for checking us out.
Yeah, no, we love having you along. Thanks for giving us a try.
So my name's Kristin Ingram.
And I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And we are a husband and wife team of small business owners. I'm a CPA, and Jeff is an IT wizard.
Who does not do heating well. So my poor wife is huddled, pregnant, covered in blankets, trying to stay warm to deliver you this wonderful content.
That's right. And we're trying to stay awake too because we just had Moe's for lunch. So we're doing the best we can to stay awake. But that's okay, because this is going to be a really good episode because, here's the thing, right? One of our goals, our main goal with this show is to help you cut the crap out of your business. And sometimes to do that, we have to help you find new ways to get the word out about what you do. And so we've had Aurora Gregory on to talk about speaking. We've done shows about using YouTube and using Facebook Live. And and doing podcasts, which is one of our favorite things to do. And this is another tool to help you grow your audience.
Yeah.
The online summit.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what we mean by the online summit, this is one I think we need to define right up front. And the idea is an online summit is like a conference that you would go to in real life, but it's all online. Typically, the way they work is, from date A to date B, the conference is running, and every hour, every couple hours, there'll be a scheduled release of who will be speaking, and typically there's a person interviewing an expert that is connected to the summit, and those will typically go from the beginning to the end of the summit, and then usually a day or two after, all of the videos come down.
And I've actually seen some that had no replays at all.
In order to do that, you have to watch it live. Or this is the neat thing where I think makes it an interesting model is a lot of them do. It's a great way to get to a product without you being the product creator. So you're packaging up these things from all of these different people, and then you're selling them as your product. And they typically have like all access passes or maybe VIP passes, or whatever they want to call it, but something that says, if you buy this, you get lifetime access to the replays of the conference.
Yeah, and usually, I've seen those depending on who the speakers are, how long it is. I've seen some of these that are like 2 days. I've seen some of these that span over 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, I saw one that literally was 88 speakers.
Wow.
And this was put together by a guy who just wanted to start his own summit. And this is the interesting thing is it's a great way if you're new to an area and you want to sort of gain authority, sort of in a little bit more visible circle. Hosting these things are a great way to do that because you get to interact with all the big names in the field. And you might know what you're talking about, but it helps show that you're at that level. And but the great thing is you come out of the pipeline with a product that you can sell to people right away.
Yeah.
It's typically a decent value product, but it's a lot of people say it's a quick way to get to a 6-figure income I do think it takes a little bit more work than a podcast, but I think the quickest you can monetize of ways to share It's a great way to grow your email list. A lot of people will do them. A lot of the smaller ones are sometimes just ways to exchange emails. But especially if you got a decent sized list, you could do really well working with an online seminar.
Yeah. So, the basics of these structurally for both the creators and the speakers. So basically what happens is you get together a team of people. And typically a lot of these online summits have a minimum email list size that you must have to participate in the summit. So, we've talked about list building and why that's important. Well, this is another reason why, because this is like an entry point into these summits. I've seen some where you needed like 1,000 people on your email list. I've seen some where you needed 10,000 people on your email list in order to just qualify to speak. Because what happens is, so you set up the summit, you set up all the tech, and we're going to talk about like how you would do that. And then everybody blasts it out to their email list. So if you've got 10 speakers, in a perfect world, if you've got 10 speakers and each one has 1,000 people on their email list, then you're potentially emailing up to 10,000 people. Yep. Now there might be some crossover, so you've got to kind of be careful with that. But all of the people who opt in, if you're the organizer, you have the ability to sell them the all access pass. And sometimes there's revenue sharing with that. If you're a speaker, you get access to all of the email addresses that are collected.
And that's typically what the speakers are going for.
Right. Typically the speakers want, to get in front of new faces, get new audience, and get all those email addresses. So, one of the things that you've got to be careful with is that inevitably you're going to have people who just opt in because they want to see a specific person, right? So, if I'm on somebody's list and they email me and say, hey, I'm going to be part of this summit, sign up for it, I might just watch their presentation and that's it. And then when everybody else starts emailing me, I might opt out of everybody else. Yeah. So, it's not a foolproof way, but you should end up with a list, depending on the size of the summit, that is quite a bit larger than what you started with.
So I was reading an article on Entrepreneur, trying to research just for my own knowledge, how do you put these things together? And there's this gentleman, Naveed Moses, who actually, I believe, taught Chandler Bolt of the Self-Publishing School, which is a name I've actually heard because I attended one of his summits. And he put together the first one, he had a list of 1,000 people, sold a couple hundred all-access passes. But the thing that he did that was nice was his email list went from 1,000 to 3,000. And, now, it's like, in a couple of years, he's earning six figures for doing these things and teaching people like Chandler Bolt how to do these things. So it's a great way to build relationships. That's the more important thing than getting them to use their email list. If they like it and they're engaged, they'll use your list. But ultimately, it's about building relationships with who should be your peers in a space online.
Well, and that's the thing that's really interesting because, I think we spend a lot of time, don't get me wrong, these are a lot of work to coordinate these, okay? But we spend a lot of time trying to get on other people's shows, to try to get, on other people's channels, guest blog, do whatever we can do to get new audience, when you can really hack other people's audiences by setting up an online summit. I mean, let's say that you do... maybe you do a really short one that's maybe like 2 days in the afternoon. Okay. And I've even seen some of these where the interviews are recorded.
Yeah.
So nothing is live. Like literally you're just kind of putting it out there.
For most of these, none of them are live.
Right. So, but what you do is you say, okay, on Thursday and Friday afternoon, we're going to have 3 speakers each afternoon. So, you need to have 6 people. If those 6 people each have 1,000 people on their email list, you now have access, to all of these emails. You can also do some advertising towards, these people's fan bases. But it's interesting because if you say, hey, I'm having a summit and you're going to be one of 6 speakers, you know, and all you've got to do is you've got to email your list and help promote it. That's a lot easier than saying, hey, can I please be on your show? Hey, can I please guest blog for you? Hey, can I,
you're going to them with a
proposition.
A proposition of potentially how you can help them too, because typically people who are either in the expert space or who are online and involved in any way are trying to get attention. And, you know, typically if you have a proposition that sounds appealing, it will be considered.
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting way for you to deliver value to an audience, right? Whether it's your audience or the other people's. And it's an interesting proposition to the people you're approaching, you know, to participate in it. Okay. So let's talk about what we need in order to do this, because it sounds like it's really complicated.
Well, first we're going to start with the technology. I'm going to be honest, the technology is the simplest part of this.
Wow.
We get through that, we'll go into the we'll go into what you need to complete out, like skill set wise, and we'll get to the more important things that you need to be able to do there. So first off is you need a way to do interviews. These I've never seen audio only. I've only ever seen video. So you need some way to record video. Think of it like a Google Hangouts or a Skype, because you're going to be recording interviews with people.
You could use Zoom for this too. Zoom would work.
Zoom would work for this. Pretty much anywhere where you can be in the same room as someone. I mean, heck, at this point, electronically, you know, with this one, you could even at this point do a Facebook Live if you wanted to actually do them live, and then, you know, take out the videos, download the videos.
Yeah, you could do it that way.
So, I mean, any way that you get 2 people talking and being heard through one output to an individual watching. And like I said, Hangouts and Skype came to mind first, but Zoom is out there. There's a lot of like Webinar Ninja, you know, any webinar software you could do this in.
And I would imagine, like, if you did this through webinar, like I'm thinking like Webinar Jam, because that allows you to schedule multiple like sessions. So I actually think that might work really well. That you could just kind of set it up and that would containerize a lot of this for you.
Yeah, that could work. Then you need a way to deliver the content. You know, it could be usually they're set up on a web page. The videos might be hosted like embedded from YouTube. They're not publicly listed in YouTube, but you can still embed them in your web page. Or through email sequence, any way you wanted to, you could deliver the content.
So I could see, like thinking about platforms that I'm aware of, you could do this through Webinar Jam. You could do this through something like Kajabi, where you could do like a page with the videos embedded into them.
I mean, even a WordPress site, you could have a lockdown area in a WordPress site that, you know, when you sign up for, you essentially register, which gives you access to the area.
You could do it through like a landing page, like something like Lead Pages. You could do a landing page with something like Thrive
Jeff Walker
themes.
approach to it is you'd have a web page per seminar. You would just be driving them all, or you'd have one web page and you'd swap out the video when the new one would go live.
Yeah, no. So I think
that'd be another scarcity approach. You know, like this one's live for the next 30 minutes.
Yep. And that's what I see a lot of them do. Is a lot of them. Unless you watch the video when it's playing live to everybody else, you have to buy the access pass in order to get the replays.
Yep. And if you plan it out well, you could even have time built in 40, let's say like 15 minutes in between the guests, and you could fill it in with like ads, you know, like video, like emotional branded videos. Could be like the beginning of a Super Bowl game. It'd be wonderful.
Well, I've seen Brendan Burchard do this in some of his like live stuff, where when they take breaks between the live content, they're like ads for Experts Academy or High Performance
or best of kind of video or
Yep. No, that works.
Now, you also need a way to sell them the upsell, which is the lifetime access. So wait for them to get back to it. I mean, I have to say Kajabi. It's what Kristin and I use, and you could definitely do this all in a course in Kajabi. You could do it in other ways too. There are other places like you could create a evergreen webinar through something like Webinar Jam. So there are other ways, but you need a way for them to be able to get back to it if they pay, and a way to get the payment and process it and give them access to an area.
And basically any course software you could do that in.
Yeah. So any kind of course software you could do that in. But that's the technology side. Yeah, I could go into a lot more detail here, and each of those are themselves their own thing, right? It needs its own platform. Just like you would if you did a podcast or most anything else. Now, here's where it becomes more complicated, I think. And I do think you need interview skills to be able to pull off. Summits are typically interview delivered. They're not, they are not typically this person sends their video, that person sends that video. There's typically a central theme that you're holding on to, and you need an interviewer to sort of go through the process with people to make sure that they're staying on target with what the summit's about, or else you get Michael Hyatt and his 54th reason why you should do his best year ever course.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing too, is I think if you have it as an interview format, it's much easier to keep people from pitching their own products during the summit, and you're directing the value that they're delivering.
And some of these guys are very good, and they're going to get to pitching their stuff anyway, which is, you're not trying to stop them from doing it. You just don't want them to go, oh, I ran out of time. Send them that video advert we have, for our big expensive course, and we'll just have that as our part of the summit.
And I think the thing too is, like, in an interview format, it's much easier to keep people on time than if you give them time to speak. So I think that is a good plan.
But the interview skills, I think, are probably the most important thing that you need. Even though the next couple are pretty close. Networking skills. You need to have the ability to find and interact with people that you probably don't know, that you probably look up to.
Right, because that's the thing. You have to get people on your summit that other people are going to want to see. Now, you can do this with people who are newer.
Just realize the return will be smaller. The likelihood of sales will be much smaller.
But the thing is, like, I mean, if you get a whole bunch of people that, are delivering value, and maybe they have 500 to 1,000 people on their email list, it could be worth it as a trial run. Yeah. And then say, hey, I did this summit and we collected this many email addresses from people who had very small lists. Imagine what we could do for you.
Yes. We had 100 people that had a list size of 100 or more, and we each ended up with 300 more email addresses.
Yeah. So I think that that's key. And, it's not just networking with the speakers, but you also have to be networking to get people to go. Sometimes that's running ads, that's doing lives on your own page. Maybe that's bringing some of the potential speakers, onto your Facebook page and then promoting that. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
Or saying, I can't guarantee that let's say I get like someone like big, like Russell Brunson is going to come and talk to my webinar, which is wonderful. And someone like him is probably going to share it out to his people. But if he forgets, what happens, right? But going into it, once I have him, I can start running ads against his audience saying, oh, Russell Brunson is going to be over here.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So kind of having some, and I know we didn't really talk about this, but having some knowledge of like Facebook ads and things like that would probably be pretty useful.
Organizational skills. That's, I think, maybe the most important thing in all of this. I mean, think about this. Let's say you're just doing 10 people. You're trying to get interviews set up with 10 people. Most of these things are not, they're edited like maybe like the front bit of garbage is taken off and the back bit of garbage is taken off, but there's probably little to no editing on most of these types of videos. It's two people chatting interviews. And, but the thing is, you still have to get all the people. You have to get all the people together in a room. You have to make sure that the website's ready, that the videos are ready to go, that it works. So as the summit starts, there'll probably be a little like introduction by you or whoever's running it, and then it will start going off into the speakers.
Right.
But you have to make sure each of the pieces are in place and that it can roll.
And when you say room, you mean the digital room, the online room.
I'm sorry. I see things differently than other people.
I know, but I just want people to make sure that they understand that this is not something that you're doing in person.
Yes, you're completely right. It's in a page that I'm calling a room.
Right. And the thing is, like, you can actually, remember we said like a lot of these are not live. Okay. So, I mean, if you wanted to do live and you wanted to have a chat and do feedback and whatever, that's awesome. But you could record all of these interviews ahead of time and then, put it out there and promote and everything.
I'm pretty sure most of the people who do these have little to no live content in them at all.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So you could record
even like the introductions, and that kind of stuff. And it's obvious when you watch them, it's like, okay, hi, I'm the host. I'm introducing this next interview that we're going to do. And then it cuts to me talking to two people, sometimes in the same room as them. I don't think you sell it as in it's all being live, but it's going to be live broadcast at this point.
Right. But that's the thing. But, if you kind of think of it that, okay, it's kind of like having like a podcast or a YouTube channel where you're interviewing people. You've got to schedule 10 interviews. You get the 10 interviews done. Everybody knows the content is done and it's okay. And then you put together the summit piece and you blast it out to your email list and make it happen.
One thing about it too is part of your marketing, you're going to have an agenda set up, right? So you have to have this agenda set up, and I might be skipping ahead a little bit here too, or that's something we missed. But you're going to have like an agenda set up of who's going to be there. It's going to be this person. Here's that headshot of theirs with some text about who they are and what they're going to talk about. And that's as much marketing as the actual ads and stuff that go out, because people are going to come in, they're going to see the list of who's going to be there.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like you really, when you schedule these, when you're trying to get people to sign up, you're going to want to schedule. I think that, I've signed up for some of these before, and it's like, hey, it starts this day at this time. And you don't know how long it's going to run. You don't know who's going to be on what day. You don't really know anything that's going on.
My suggestion would be go to the website for like a big convention, either a consumer focused one, like a Comic-Con or Podcasters Movement, a conference that has a reputation of being a good conference. Look at their webpage. What other types of stuff they have. An agenda of what's happening, and that's who's talking, what are they talking about.
And typically they're like speaker bios, and there's a little blurb about their talk. Because that's the thing, is like what you're really trying to do is you're trying to put together, lots of free value. And here's, I think, one tip. I think a lot of people get hyper focused on, well, most of my audience works, and so, they're not going to sign up unless I do it at night. But if we do 3 hours of content at night, that's a lot. Most of these summits are held in the middle of the day.
Yes, most of these are typically, the last one is like 5 or 6.
Yep.
I was looking at one, and I forget what conference it was, but it was literally, like you said, it was one of the longer ones. It was over a week. And you can tell all the big names of the guys on the weekend.
Yep.
But, one was at 1 o'clock, one was 4 o'clock, one was 6 o'clock. So like 3 during the day, and then, on the weekend there were 3 on both weekend days.
Yep. So that's the thing. But, especially if you're going to sell this as a product later, you're probably going, to want to have it during the day. Because the key is not to get as many people live, watching live as you can. It's to get people to sign up. And if you're going to sell it, price it at a point where people are going to go, well, it's $97 and I'm going to get all this content. I'm just going to buy it. And if I can't watch it live, that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's like, it's a mix of, the better you can sell the speakers that are going to be there, And that's your networking, your organizational skills, your sales skills.
And ultimately, you're not marketing yourself in this unless you're one of the speakers. Especially if you're the interviewer, it's not about you. It's about the people you're interviewing. And that has to be central to it as you're interviewing them and as you're marketing it. You're the person who's the business doing this, but it's about the people who are giving content and the people who are receiving content. You are just a conduit helping some people get some really good information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I can see this. I think a lot of people think that this is just something like, in what we call the expert space, that, oh, well, these are small business experts. These are, productivity experts. Because that's typically, there's like a theme. These are writing experts. They'll help you get published. I would
self-publish or whatever. Yeah.
I would love to see more of these in the craft scene.
Well, think about, it's like, what kind of conference could you not translate online?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. But that's the thing is like, I'd love to see something that it's short knitting classes, short, sewing classes. You could teach pretty much anything through this.
The only thing I would say would be different than an on-ground conference would be you wouldn't have tracks.
That would just be too complicated.
That would be way too complicated. So what you would, maybe if you wanted to simulate that, you would probably have it, let's say, over 5 weeks. So 5 different times, and one's going to be focused on painting miniatures. One's going to be focused on how to create better maps for your world.
That sounds very geeky. I don't know who would attend things like that.
How to make your cosplay stuff would be a week. Board games would be a week maybe, but you could break it down. Maybe if you want to do something like a big conference where they have the different tracks, you would take the tracks and split them off maybe into their own conferences.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that if you really thought that you would have 3 different tracks, maybe you have one of these every 4 months.
Because the problem is, too, you're diluting your audience if you try and do it all at once. There are lots of board gamers right now. It's a very popular thing in the geek culture. But they don't do that. Maybe they don't even care about cosplay. Maybe they don't like tabletop role-playing games.
Which half our audience is like, he is speaking a language that I do not understand.
It sounds perfectly natural to me.
Yeah, I think you're confusing shows. Like, half people are like, I don't even know what I don't know. Is that Swahili? I have no idea.
Honey, they all know what a board game is.
Yes, they all know what a board game is. That's true. I hope. So I kind of want you to think about, like, think creatively, like, how could you put one of these together? Even if it's a collaboration, if you know a whole bunch of people that could benefit from something like this.
And if you're one of those people that don't have the 1,000 or 10,000 email list, get 20 people who are in the same situation that you are, and come up with the theme and take the lead and push it forward.
Now, you have, one of the things you have to do is you have to convince these experts to participate and share it out, right? So the way that you do that, first of all, like I said earlier in the show, I think it's a much easier pitch to pitch something like this than to say, hey, can I be on your podcast? Hey, will you be on my podcast? Hey, can you be, because you're leveraging these other people. And especially what I would recommend if you're going to ask people is I would try to go for a bigger ask first. Okay. Because if you can get somebody bigger, and it doesn't have to be like one of your top tier people, but let's say it's like one of your like 1.5 to 2 tier people.
Ask a top tier person. Ask.
Well, but here's the thing, right? Because you're trying to convince all these people, right? And once one of them says no, that person's off the list. So let's say that you go to, somebody who's near your top tier and you get them on board. As you're trying to sell everybody else to participate, you say this person is going to be on, this person's in.
Yeah, I thought about doing an interview show when I started podcasting, which I decided early on it would be way too much work. And well, the great advice John Lee Dumas gave me and many other people actually, it was to, take the top people you've ever gotten to say yes, and always include them in your pitches out to people you're trying to get. Now, you switch around a little bit if you're going for someone big and you've worked with like people who've worked with them before, that's a little different. But the thing is, always take the biggest names that you do and put them in these letters requesting interviews, so they might know that person or have heard of that person and go, oh, if that person did it, I can do it.
Right.
And sometimes it might work the other way too. Who knows? But I mean, he's probably the most successful person I know who went from, sort of obscurity to interviewing the top names of entrepreneurs pretty much around the world.
Yep.
And has done quite well. And he name drops intentionally.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like, you're trying to get, you're trying to use those relationships that you're building in order to get other people on board. But so the thing that you've got to sell when you're selling this to people is, this is going to help you build new relationships. This is going to make it easy for you to expose yourself to a lot of new people. Right? Because think about if you've got 1,000 people on your list and you go into a 20-person summit, you have the potential to meet, at least 19,000 new people. Let's be conservative. Let's say 9,000 new people. Who wouldn't love to do a 1-hour interview and, do a little bit of promotion to your list and meet 9,000 new people? Right? So that's really easy. Make sure that you have a launch plan that includes, some sample copy, things that you want them to highlight, things you want them to talk about, because that makes it easier for them, right? If they don't know a lot about your summit and what you're doing and what's going on, and then you say, okay, can you share this out? Well, what are they going to talk about?
Yeah. It's like, if you're in that moment where you're trying to write up something for someone else and you're not feeling it, or maybe it's something for yourself and you're just like, I'm not feeling this. Imagine like being asked, or someone comes and says, hey, I'm doing something, write some copy for me. And realize, making it easy for them is providing them samples of where to go, what things are, to make it easy as possible for them to share. Because especially the bigger these people are, the less time they have to share with your conference. And you know what? They might not even get to it. They might forget. They might just go, I really don't know them well enough, and I'll do the interview, but I don't know if I'm going to actually put it out to my people, because I just don't know if it's going to be good or not, because maybe it's the first year, who knows. Maybe that happens. But, your launch plan, you sort of target some of his audience. His audience shows up and hears about it anyway. And invite him back the next year if he wants to, and he's more likely to do it next year. So sometimes, especially the bigger the people are, you have to make bigger concessions. Like, if you get me on your summit, I'll be grateful to be there. I'll share the stuff out. Me in 100 years, when I'm 850 years old and I'm a 500 billionaire over, I might not think about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, that's, make sure that you're sharing sample copy with them, share sample graphics with them, just make it as easy as possible. And, like Jeff said, if they don't share it, play the long game with them, run some ads against their audience, hopefully what'll happen is you'll make enough of an impact that next year they'll want to come back and they'll want to share it. So the last thing to think about when you're doing this is, I think a lot of people, we did the launch episode, right, on how to launch. A lot of times we just think like, okay, I'm going to make the pitch to sell this during the summit. And then if people don't buy, well, then I guess we're done.
I'm done.
And I think that that's short-sighted.
Especially think about this. Let's say you're that guy who put 88 interviews together. So let's say that's 88 hours or maybe only 80 hours of content of some huge named people I'm sure were in there. I don't know. I didn't go to the conference.
Or what happens if they become big after the conference is over?
Afterwards. Some of them were probably big. Some of them probably weren't as big. But he probably had a couple tier 1, tier 2 people that got pulled in. But either way, that's 80 hours of probably, if you did a good job picking, really good content.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. So, you have a couple different options. You could, when you do your next summit, make this like an upsell, like, hey, for, if it originally sold for $150, say, hey, for an additional $49, you can get last year's content too. Or maybe you make that a free bonus if people buy this year's content. The other thing you can do too is you can take some of the best of content and sell it as mini courses. So maybe you do a small business summit, but maybe, there were a couple speakers on marketing. There were a couple that were like financial.
Maybe you pull your tracks out at that point.
Right. You kind of break that up and say, okay, if you really need the marketing piece, here are the marketing pieces.
Especially I can imagine if you have one of these bigger conferences, there are going to be internal themes that develop accidentally.
Yeah. And like some of these, if you've got like 20 to 40 speakers, people might not want all of it. They just might want certain bits.
And I think anyone here would agree that, if you're doing like on a pretty big topic, like building your own terrain for tabletop games, that there could be so many internal themes to that, it would be ridiculous.
Well, I'm kind of looking at Jeff like blink. Okay. But you figure, even something like you do world building. Okay. So, you've done 200 plus episodes on world building. So clearly you could pull together a summit that had a whole bunch of speakers that talk about different aspects of world building. But then you could kind of break it up into, is it writing? Is it the actual like world building piece? You could have a whole mini course on geography probably, What? You're looking at me.
Kind of broad, but okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. See, because I don't live in this world that Jeffrey lives in. And so, but I think that you've got a lot of opportunities. I would love to see more people do these, because I think, we're kind of, a lot of us are webinared out at this point, that having the one person webinar or, you're having like the two people bantering on the webinar. Those are fun, but this is like taking that to a whole nother level.
This is a way of scaling out your ability to speak to people over time. And, to a much larger audience than you could probably reach on your own.
Yep, exactly. So, we're always trying to find new tools for you to put in your toolbox, right? Because, I really believe that every small business is one idea away, one step away from breaking through and becoming, the business that you've always dreamed of. Maybe this is your step, right? Maybe it's you need to grow your audience and a summit would really help you do that. So thank you so much for being with us again this week, and we'll see you next time.
This was Small Biz Life.